Okay, if you're interested in learning Chinese, or if you've already started, if you haven't started yet, it doesn't matter. I've got some good news and some bad news. So the good news is that the spoken language is actually really easy to learn. The bad news is that you really should learn how to read and write Chinese if you really want to learn it. Believe it or not, the Chinese spoken language really isn't that hard to learn. It might take a little while, but you can get used to the tones. And understanding the language comes with practice, even if you're dealing with a really unusual dialect. Like I've said, the written language is the hard part. Learning how to read Chinese takes a lot of time and a lot of discipline. But the thing is, you need to do it. I'm serious. If you don't learn the written language, your understanding of the spoken language will be very, very limited. Anything that's like an abstract concept, anything that would be sort of a higher level of dialogue is going to be inaccessible to you. The truth is that Chinese slang and dialectical things are connected directly with the written language, believe it or not. And to understand why, you really have to understand the history of the Chinese language. You can actually see a lot of the history of the language in maps of Chinese dialects like this one. This simplified map, translated into English, kind of helps, but the difference in the Mandarin spoken in Shenyang and the Mandarin spoken in Chengdu is pretty extreme. Or as John DeFrancis put it over 40 years ago, the idea of Chinese as some sort of homogeneous language is utterly laughable. In fact, the thing is, that word Mandarin that we throw around a lot, that kind of betrays the fact that there are regional differences. You see, that we've all forgotten this. The word Mandarin actually means official. Official as in like having to do with the court, or what we would say today, having to do with the government. So Mandarin, as we call it today, was really the Chinese that was spoken in the court in ancient times, or in the halls of government, as opposed to the Chinese that you would have on the street. And the language on the street was vastly different depending upon where you were in the country, something that is still true today, though not quite as extreme as it once was. And believe it or not, the same thing is true of a lot of aspects of Chinese culture. For example, the food's different in different parts of the country. If you go up north, you're going to find people who are taller and brawnier. If you go down south, they'll be a little bit shorter, maybe a little bit skinnier. Traffic is different in different places, if you're crazy like me and you actually have driven in China. And the dirty secret is that even politics are different in different parts of the country, but don't say that too loudly. So if you're looking at the spoken language, you'll notice tons of different mutually unintelligible sublanguages like Cantonese, Taiwanese, and so on. And even though the Putonghua spoken in Beijing is supposed to be the same as like in Nanjing, if you go to either place, you'll notice that it's a lot different, and people from both places might actually have a hard time understanding each other sometimes. The thing is that this was always a problem. In fact, this was much more of a problem during the imperial age than it is today, since the country now has a solid centralized education system. For example, back in the mid-18th century, it was nothing like this. So you see, when Jia Baoyu and his friend Qin Zhong go to school in chapter 9 of Dream of the Red Chamber, they're not really going to like the little red schoolhouse by the creek. Jia Baoyu and Qin Zhong are attending a family-run school, not a public school like you would see today. You see, despite the fact that the imperial examinations could technically be taken by anybody, you really had to have a lot of training in the written language to even understand the test, let alone pass it. And so as a result, the families would set up the so-called yixue, or charitable schools, that were designed to help family members who were not so well off at least stand a chance at getting an education. So there were occasionally so-called community schools, or xiaoshui, that were also set up sometimes to teach a few things to the populace. But based on the little research I've been able to do, it seems like these were mostly about disseminating official messages and promoting social harmony or spreading around propaganda than doing any actual educating. In all honesty, the modern education system has only been in China for maybe a century or so, so it's still pretty new. So back in the old days, passing the old exam meant writing a bagu wen, or a so-called eight-legged essay. That's kind of a weird phrase, but that's what we say in English. This is a formal essay format that lasted for centuries. Writing wound up being the most important thing for social mobility, and so the focus of education was chiefly on writing and literacy. In fact, the written language is largely what kept the empire alive and connected for centuries. So there are old stories of people from all over the country passing the imperial exams, going to the capital, and then discovering, to their surprise, that they couldn't communicate with each other like at all. That's apparently where that old art of using your finger to write on your palm comes from. They do this all the time to say what character it is that they are, say what character their name uses, and stuff like that. You see it all the time today. Now, even though the vast empire was largely built on the written language, not the spoken language, there still was a surprising amount of variations of character styles. Now, some of the forms of cursive script, or Cao Shu, are extremely difficult to learn how to read. Interestingly enough, the appearance of these characters in various styles turned into its own art form, Chinese calligraphy. But even the so-called regular script, or kaishu, is difficult to master because of all the character variations and the sheer number of characters that are out there. Now, the truth is that learning to read and write Chinese was kind of a natural gatekeeper for government service, right? I mean, think about it. Like, in theory, the most impoverished farmer could aspire to the halls of government, yeah, but in reality, the amount of time and effort that you had to put into actually learning the written language, like just to start, served as a natural barrier for entry for the vast majority of people. And of course, it was also very, very rare for women to be literate, including high-class women. That includes the time the Dream of the Red Chamber was composed, right, in the 18th century. And so it's very, very significant from a literary and historical perspective that the girls in the novel are so literate. And they're not just literate, of course, they are such masters of written Chinese that the poetry that they compose compares with the greatest poetry that the language has ever known. Naturally, the best way to learn written Chinese has always been to start when you're a child. But even in imperial times, teachers realized that you could not possibly learn how to read the language without learning how to write the language. And so, to this day, children who learn Chinese absolutely have to spend time learning how to write properly. So I'm going to tell you, you cannot learn the language without learning how to write. Like, you can try, but let me repeat that again. You cannot seriously learn Chinese without learning how to write. So maybe you can speak a little bit of the language, sure. You can go talk with like some, street vendor. You can say, 便宜点儿 or something like that. Please give it to me cheaper. But you will never be able to, for example, really order at a restaurant in China if you can't read the menu. And you don't know how to read the menu unless you go through the process of learning how to write. Now, naturally, going through and learning the Confucian classics will not teach you how to read the menu. But when you're interested in having like an actual in-depth conversation that goes beyond the most basic facts of life, you're going to have to learn how to read, and you're going to have to learn how educated people talk. So let me put it this way. The fact that you're a foreigner, the fact that you speak English really well or your native language really well, the fact that you might know, like 20 other languages, the fact that you have an unlimited number of digital aids to help you, none of that means anything. None of that changes the fact that you have to learn how to write the characters to learn the language. Any serious Chinese language learning program will have some sort of character workbook, such as good old integrated Chinese. Sure, it looks boring, but this kind of character practice is absolutely essential if you're actually, going to learn the language. And as awful as it seems, you really cannot learn the complex characters without learning the simple characters first. In the end, you will be hopeless to learn how to read something this complex if you can't even take the time to learn how to write the right way. And the truth is that you're never going to stop learning Chinese characters. So personally, I do Chinese writing practice every single day when I go through my daily Anki routine. I've been doing this for 20 years. So I did this by creating this handwriting card type using Anki. Now, the thing works on the honor system, I know, but then again, everything that you do in Anki is going to work on the honor system. Anyway, the idea here is to force myself to write characters a certain number of times every time I come across them, and this happens every single day. And it works. You want to know why? It works because it helps internalize the characters. So for me, it makes it a lot easier for me to know how to pronounce a character when I see it out of context if I've spent a lot of time practicing writing that character after having the pronunciation said to me, right? Or after looking at the pronunciation when I write it and trying to guess, see if I can get it right or not, right? This also helps a lot with knowing what a full word means when it pops up, especially in an unfamiliar context. Now, you need to have this because you can't expect yourself to run around with a dictionary all the time and pop it open every single time you come across something you don't know, especially if you're in the country. Now, maybe you can run around with your phone, but relying on your phone to like scan the picture and then tell you what it means using AI or whatever, like it's okay, but it takes a lot of steps. It's going to hallucinate. Maybe it'll say something wrong. Maybe it's going to confuse you. At some point in time, you really just have to learn the language. And to learn the language, you got to learn how to write. Now, I'm going to tell you a secret. The secret is that Chinese is actually not an impossible language to learn when you're a foreigner. You actually can learn how to read all of the great classic novels in the original language, and you can do it faster than you think. But you need to stay away from the scams that promise to teach you the language quickly because it don't work like that. Put some time into it and make sure that you actually practice. The key to maintaining long-term fluency is consistency and taking it seriously. Anyway, in the end, just remember, if I've learned how to do this, you can learn how to do this too. There's no reason why you can't.